What's going on, guys? Today we're going to be talking about the top 5 most common smallmouth baits and why they work. Now let's clear things up. Before we jump into any of this, these are not the only baits you use to catch smallmouth. They're not the only baits I use to catch smallmouth, but these are some of the top 5 most popular techniques to where if you've never caught smallmouth before, or if you're looking for more numbers or try to catch some of those bigger fish in your lakes or ponds or wherever you're at. Number 1, that's going to be a drop shot. Drop shot is one of the most versatile techniques when it comes to smallmouth fishing. You can catch largemouth, spotted bass on it as well, but we're talking about smallmouth. So why is a drop shot one of the most versatile? Well, you can work it in shallow water. You can work it out to deeper water, changing the size of your drop shot weight. We'll get into that in a second. It's a different presentation. It's very finessey. You know, you're dropping that bait and it's hovering right in front of their face, and when you're shaking it and it's quivering down there, I mean, it's just irresistible, and they jump all over it. A couple different common types of drop shot baits. These are some of the most popular. This is a jackal crosstail shad. Very big up on the Great Lakes, St. Clair, Erie. Another one, this is some of the most common ones. That's going to be a Strike King Dream Shot. The Dream Shot is going to be pretty similar to the crosstail shad because it's got a flat bottom on it, and the action is going to be all in the tail. As you can see, it's a very flimsy bait, as most of these drop shot baits are. Next, we're going to jump into most popular drop shot bait on the market right now, and they're very hard to find. If you can find them, scoop them up. They're like gold. That's going to be Berkeley Power Bait Max Scent Flatworm. I found 8 packs of these on Tackle Warehouse and ordered them all. Sorry, I'm a little greedy. Love these baits. But another one, this is kind of a different approach to it, but these guys are a little underrated, and these are absolute killers. This is the Beast Coast Magic Flick. It's kind of a hybrid between a KVD Dream Shot to a Jackal Crosstail Shad, and it's got that shad pattern as compared to some of these other ones that have more of a worm pattern. So it's got scales, and it's got the same action. So rigging these up, I like to throw them on a very finessey style hook. Number 1, your leader in, you're going to run a weight down to the bottom to where your line runs up. Then you got your hook here pointing straight out up to your rod. So when this is down, your weight's actually going to be in contact with the bottom to where your bait is going to be sitting up off the bottom. Now, a lot of these times when these fish got their bellies down on the actual bottom of whatever structure you're fishing, we're going to come with a different technique, a different approach that we'll get to here in a second. But when those fish are suspended up, especially in bigger schools, you know, you hear of people finding mega schools all the time, or hey, I was on a school of fish. What does that mean? It's just a large group of the same kind of fish grouping up to either feed, move up to spawn, get ready for winter. I mean, there's plenty of different reasons why you can find a school. But when you do, a drop shot is a really good technique to get some of those finickier fish out of there. The hook that we're going to be throwing, this is a Gamakatsu size 1 split shot drop shot hook. And let me just show you in comparison. I'll put it in my hand and I'll see if I can get close to the camera here. Because you're catching, especially up on the Great Lakes, I mean, 4, 5, 6, sometimes even 7 pound smallmouth. If you can get anything bigger than that, I mean, you're doing really well. But these hooks are actually going to catch them. But I'm going to show you in comparison. That is the size of hook. And there's the weight. That is the size of hook that you're throwing these drop shot baits on. A size 1 to a 1/0, and that's about all you want to go. Anything bigger than that, you're really taking away from that finessey approach. So let's move on to the next subject. To where I said to where some of these fish are going to be stuck on the bottom, bellies in the mud, feeding off a crawfish, bait fish, anything like that. Next technique is going to be a tube. A tube is another very versatile bait. It's very popular with a lot of anglers. If you know anybody fishing for smallmouth or that are offshore anglers, most of the time you're going to have a tube somewhere in their boat. Um, there's different brands again that make different tubes. I really don't think it makes a difference because this is kind of a reaction style bait as compared to that drop shot we just talked about, which is more a finesse style bait. They're getting a lot better look at those. So those are going to have a lot better of contour lines on the bait. The color's a big thing on the drop shot. To whereas tubes, there's two techniques to work a tube that are more popular than the others. There's more than that. I'll jump into that here. But number one is just dragging a tube. The tube, the bait goes up inside of it, pops out of the head here. I don't know if it can read that or not. But it's got a weight on the hook inside of here. So these are designed to fish and make contact with the bottom. So dragging that tube when you cast that out there and you're dragging that along, the reason that this one is so effective is because it mimics more than just one style of bait. If you look at this, this is a zoom, this is a 2.75, or no, I'm sorry, it's a 375. This is a bigger style tube. I like to throw these bigger size ones when I know I'm around bigger fish. In bigger numbers. You know, if I go up to Lake Erie or St. Clair or any of the Great Lakes, and I know there's going to be bigger fish, I'm going to be throwing a little bit bigger of a bait just to try to target some of those bigger ones in the schools. So you're just dragging this along the bottom. This mimics a goby. It mimics a crawdad. It mimics a dying bluegill. I mean, the action that this has when it falls through the water, you know, it's got kind of that spiraling, just kind of blah action when it's falling. And the size of the weight really makes a difference when you're fishing these, because a lot of times they want it with that faster rate of fall, and you're popping that thing up and it's falling back down, which is another technique I'll get to in a second. But another tactic is when you're around a lot of riprap or rocks or anything that you're going to get snagged up a lot in, just downsize the weight of the head of the tube jig that you slide up inside, and it's going to have a different rate of fall. It won't quite get stuck down in those crevices as much. As a fisherman, you're going to get hung up sometimes. And it's frustrating, but if you learn to get past that, you move on, and that's why you have a plethora of baits, and your old ladies kind of yell at you or get on you about having so much fishing tackle. The next technique on a tube would be snapping a tube. I guess we'll combine this. Snapping a tube or just hopping it off the bottom. It gives kind of that fleeing motion that'll trigger some of these smallmouth fish, because they're naturally curious fish, very aggressive when they bite. I mean, they fight like a bulldog, but also very curious. They'll follow a lot, and a lot of times dragging that when they're a little more lethargic really helps. But when you're snapping that tube up off the bottom and it's going back down and falling, you snap it up again, it's coming back down and falling. Just the action of that will be enough to trigger that fish into biting. And a lot of times, especially with a tube drop shot as well, a lot of times they'll hit it on the fall. You know, when this thing is going down and you just pick up on it and you feel that mushiness, you just kind of lean into it and start reeling, and you put those fish in the boat. Other options, the smaller option, when you fish a tube in a smaller body of water, where there's a little bit smaller fish, or they're a little more finicky, or it's a little bit colder of a weather. Strike King, this is a coffee tube. This is the 2.75 inch. This is a Gobilicious color. I did a video before where I caught some fish out in a reservoir. with just a tube, and sometimes that's the deal. I caught a few on a drop shot, a couple on a crankbait, but the deal that I seem to find worked best and I got more bites on was a tube. So keeping different rods on your boat ready to go is a big technique. But that smaller size tube, I'll fish that when I'm around smaller size fish, or I'm looking for more numbers, just a fun day out on the water, or it's a little bit colder. So we're going to move to the next technique. We've covered drop shots, we've covered tubes. Let's change it up a little bit. We're going to go out of the soft plastic. We'll jump back into it in a second, but we're going to go to another technique that's worked very well for me, and that's throwing a crankbait. There's different size crankbaits, there's different companies. I'm not here to shove one down your throat saying this one's better than the other. I will say why I throw a couple of the ones I have. So smallmouth, naturally, their forage are crawfish anywhere in the country that's got them. And then we'll talk about changing up the paint schemes on your crankbaits as compared to what body of water you're fishing. Sometimes their main forage are gobies or perch. A lot of times their forage is crawfish, and then other times, it is shad or minnows or smelt or wherever in the country you call your bait fish. So let's talk about that. When they're on a crankbait bite, number one, it can be a blast because they just absolutely hammer it, and you get those treble hooks in them, and they're just slashing around, they're jumping, and it's just a good time. So a couple of the ones that I throw depends on the depth of water that I'm going to be fishing. The most common depth is, for me, on some of these bodies of water that I'm fishing, is going to be anywhere from, I don't know, from 6 feet to 12 to 14 feet. If that's the case on that shallower side, if they're on a crankbait bite, and I know you got a full moon phase or whatever's going on, they're up feeding for these fish on the rocks. A good bait to throw, and I'll get a couple of these out just to show a couple different colors. A good bait to throw, especially for smallmouth, we're going to start with a wigglewort. Original wiggleworts can be very hard to find, but wiggleworts with these crawfish patterns, I don't know if you can see those, there. Wigglewort with these crawfish patterns are very effective almost year-round. The reason that I like throwing these is because they've got a very erratic action. It's got kind of a one knocker in there. Some of them got BBs in it. But the biggest thing on presentation on these is that erratic hunting action. A lot of times when these are coming through the water, it's not coming in at a straight line. I mean, these things are going left and right and bouncing off of things, and it's just a huge commotion that draws these fish out. Like I said, these smallmouth are naturally curious. Another upgrade from that, if I'm going a little bit deeper into the water, I'm keeping that same erratic action on a crankbait. Sometimes the same colors. Just depends on time of year. So, just like any other bait fish or forage, crawfish will go through different patterns throughout the year, whether they molt or spawn or whatever they're doing. They change colors. So having different color crankbaits in those crawl patterns are really going to help. But this is going to be the next one that I like to throw. And if I'm crankbait fishing for smallmouth, I'm going to be throwing this bait 80% of the time. I mean, I absolutely love it. This is the Spro Rock Crawler. This is the 55 version, so it dives 9 to 14 feet, right in that perfect range that I like to fish in on some of these bodies of water. This one is going to be the Mudbug color. Just another crawfish pattern. It's got some pink on the bottom, reddish brown on top, kind of tan on the sides. When the crawfish start molting, or they shed their shells up on full moon phase and get up on the rocks. This is a color I really like to throw in those clear water situations. Um, when it gets into sometimes dirtier water situations, I don't know, this is just for colors example, but something bright. I mean, smallmouth love bright colors, and there's just something about chartreuse or orange or pink or it just drives smallmouth crazy, and they'll tend to bite it a little bit better than what a largemouth does. So a lot of the times I'm going to be throwing the Spro rock crawler. The reason I like this one is because it's got that same hunting erratic action, and these things come over boulders or riprap or logs or whatever you're throwing. I mean, they're absolutely phenomenal. I haven't told people about it a lot. I just started throwing them within the past year or so, and I come to love these things. On the same concept, keeping crankbait wise, instead of going from an erratic hunting action that a lot of the times in the warmer weather they're really going to like. Sometimes it gets cold, you get cold fronts come in, and that's when I'm going to come in and throw a slimmer style crankbait. This here is a Berkeley Fritz side. I believe this is a 7. Yeah, Berkeley Fritz side 7, so it dives about 7 feet. But it's still got those crazy colors. I think this is the powderback chartreuse. And it's got a lot tighter of an action when it's coming through the water. And a lot of times those small subtle changes that you make to your baits can put those bigger fish or more fish in the boat. From there, I think that covers crankbaits pretty much. When I get out to deep water, when I say deeper water, to me deep water is, anything 20 plus feet. I mean, you can jump into the deeper diving crankbaits. These are the Strike King 5XDs, 6XDs. They do phenomenal on those deeper ledges or drop offs or deeper structure on these lakes, and you'll work them just like anything else. The next option I'm going to get into, let's see, we covered 3 of the 5. I'm going to jump into that same moving style bait, but we're going to get a lot more finessey again. There's just something I love about throwing light line, small finessey baits and catching these big old smallmouth. I mean, they just pull on the drag. You're real screaming. I mean, you got a big 4, 5, 6 pound smallmouth jumping out of the water, and you got this tiny little spinning rod that you're just fighting it in. It's absolutely amazing. But the next technique that I'm getting into is a swim bait. Now, largemouth swim baits and smallmouth swim baits are a little bit different. Throwing for a largemouth, typically you're throwing those bigger 5-inch to sometimes 8, 9, 10-inch swim baits. I mean, some of these guys in California are throwing. But when I'm smallmouth fishing, I like to keep it very, very small and finessey. This is a 3-inch swim bait. I mean, when I say small, it's small. Fits in the palm of your hand. This is the size of swim bait I'm throwing. This is a 3-inch swim bait rigged with a round ball head. The size of the ball head is completely up to you. It basically it depends on how comfortable you are throwing these. So I like to throw, I believe this is a 5/16 ounce head when I'm just kind of ticking it off the rocks. Going up to a bigger size head depends on how deep of water that you're fishing. But the reason that these are so effective is because it's got that moving action that mimics those bait fish that these fish are feeding on, and it's just a small subtle action coming through that water. I mean, when it's coming through there, that tail's going, and they just go absolutely crazy for it. I mean, the different colors on these, this is kind of a shad pattern here. Got a little bit of holographic in it. The whites, grays, a little bit of blue. I mean, that mimics bait fish all around the country. So this is why I like to keep it kind of simple on these. I'll throw one that mimics a bait fish when I'm in a body of water that their prominent food source is shad or minnows. And then I'll switch it up to where if they're, let's say the Great Lakes, they feed on gobies or perch even. This is a Kitech. This one's a little bit bigger. This is a 3.3 inch. but going to be just as effective. I think that 0.3 of an inch doesn't make a difference. But this is the perch pattern. It's going to be the same style, that boot tail style, ribbed body, and it just mimics those fish, and they go absolutely crazy for these things. On to the next one. We're going to go back to a hard bait. Let's see, we covered 4. This is going to be number 5, most common tactic of catching smallmouth and why it works. Number 5, going to be a crankbait. Or I'm sorry, this is going to be a jerkbait. I already threw the crankbait. A jerkbait is going to be one of the most versatile baits when it comes to hard baits because they make different lips on these, just like crankbaits, that get down there to any depth you really need it to. This one here, it's got 3 hooks on it. There's also some that got 2. That all determines how big a fish you got and how aggressive they are at the moment you're fishing for them. I like to throw a jerkbait that's suspending, and this is why I like throwing jerkbaits. It's a little bit different than a crankbait. These things, when you rip these, they've got that erratic darting motion. When you kill it, it just stays right there. So sort of similar to that drop shot bait we were talking about, where it hovers right in front of their face, and then you pop that thing a couple times, it's going to trigger those very intrigued smallmouth into biting these. Jerk baits are really, really effective baits in colder weather, but that's not the only time to throw them. Cold weather, because of the fact that it's suspending, you can give it a couple small twitches and then it'll just stop right there. Couple small twitches and just stop right there. And a lot of times your cadence is it's a big deal when getting these fish to trigger. In the summertime, the warmer weather months, if you're popping that thing and this thing's just jerking through the water, you see you got a follower because you're most of the time fishing clear water for smallmouth, and you just kill it. It just stops. A lot of times they'll hit it on that kill, but if you twitch it just one more time, they're going to be all over these things. Jerk baits are a very effective way to catch smallmouth. I mean, they catch largemouth, spotted bass. Almost anywhere in the country you can get away with throwing it. You're not going to want to throw these where you got a lot of grass. This is more designed for open water, rocky or sandy bottoms. Anything you're not really going to get hung up on because it is treble hooks and you got 3 of them. So that's going to be top 5. If you stuck around this whole time, thank you so much, but I'm going to throw in one more tip because I know if I don't throw this in here, I'll get a lot of crap from a lot of people that throw these. And that's going to be another finesse style bait, the Ned rig. I mean, this thing has just taken the world by storm over the past couple years, and there's a reason that it does. I mean, it absolutely destroys these smallmouth. We talked about a lot of these baits that get these fish to trigger. A Ned rig, this is Z-Man TRD, on the other hand, is one of the most stupidest way to catch fish because it is such a dead stick motion. You can hop it up and let it come back down. A lot of times you're just pulling this thing and you're letting the current or whatever just let that little end wiggle there. And it's such a do-nothing bait. It's a smaller, tiny version of what Yamamoto Senko is. I mean, it's kind of a do-nothing style bait, and they just absolutely love it because it's a different presentation than what they're used to seeing. Dragging this thing along the bottom, you bring it up over rocks or just pulling it across sandy structure. This one is so versatile because you can fish it in any depth of water. You can fish it in any structure, really, except for weeds. It's got an exposed hook. You're gonna hook up on weeds. But if you're on those areas anywhere in the country that's got open bottoms, when I say open bottoms, I mean sand, rock, anything you can come up over and you're not going to pull up a bunch of slop on, that's a good time to throw the TRD. A lot of times people just starting out fishing, can absolutely slay them on this thing. This goes from the novice angler all the way up to the elites. It's a staple in almost every one of those smallmouth guys' box. And the reason is because it catches fish. So, that was the top 5 most common smallmouth baits plus 1. So, thank you so much for following along. If you liked the video, if you learned anything at all, thank you so much. Please make sure you hit the like button down below. It really helps me out. I'm just starting on this channel. Also, if you could hit the subscribe button, it's free. It doesn't really cost anything. And if you want to hit that notification bell as well, it just lets you know when I got new videos coming out. Thank you so much for sticking around. I know it's been a long video. Hopefully you learned a couple things. We'll see you next time.